because I can't see very much right now with the slides up, so you won't be missed, I promise. Also remember to have fun, because even though things are a little bit different, I hope that we can have some fun today. And just please stay on mute, because we do have, I think, maybe 100 people with us today in the Zoom, which is so cool. But if we're all talking, then we can't get anything done. So if we can just all agree to that, that's awesome. So Clancy is also going to be our presenter today. He's the expert. So I'm just here to help moderate and run the slideshow. And I might talk for a little bit for a while to give him a break. But Clancy is our rock star today. So here's what we'll talk about. First, what is consumer decision making? And then the difference between consumer decision making and multi-species judging. Clancy?
Okay. Next on the agenda is the study guide, budget, and the scenario. In this section, we will talk about the differences between multi-species judging and consumer decision making. Mainly, we'll talk about the study guide, the budget, and the scenario. Plus, I do have a little bit more information for all of you keeners out there. Next on the agenda is how the judging is. Here we will discuss what to expect once the competition starts, from member wranglers to room monitors and scorecards and reason markers. We will explain the mechanics of the judging competition. Go ahead, Erin.
And then, yeah, we'll go through 10 steps to consumer decision making. And so for you as a competitor, what are kind of the 10 steps to run through as you're evaluating the class of items to gather your information and then decide on your rankings?
And after that, we will talk about preparing and delivering oral reasons. This is probably the most important part of consumer decision making. Once you have decided your placings, you need to explain why you placed them the way you did. This section will help you to organize your thoughts and deliver them to the reason marker.
Then we'll run through a short example that I'm calling the pencil class. So we'll run through a quick example, pretty straightforward one, and then I'll talk about something called a decision-making matrix, which is something that you might be able to use as a tool if there's two items that are really close and you're not sure which one is better than the other one. That's what you can do to help split hairs and decide which one should be above the other. So just another tool for you to use.
Okay, and then after the pencil class, we will look at a honey class that we had down here in the South a few years ago. Some of you might remember it. We'll walk you through it and give the official placings and reasons. Then we will talk a bit about splits and how they can change the outcome of a class. Then Erin?
Yeah, and then right at the end there, we will have some time before we wrap up the How to Succeed section of the webinar for specifically members. And competitors, just to chat and debrief, and if there are any questions that came up as you were thinking and that we didn't stop to take some time to talk about it in the moment, then you can just write down your question or remember it, and then we have some time to talk about it then, okay? Thumbs up, sounds good? Perfect.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, good question, Clancy. Are there any questions before we get started?
There's none in the chat. And I don't think anyone has their hand up that I can see. So I think you guys are good to go.
All right, roll.
Okay, well, here we go then. So what is consumer decision making? Consumer decision making is the judging of everyday consumer items. This is really nothing new. You've actually been judging most of your life. From the clothes you put on each morning to the brand of toothpaste you use. They all involve you choosing one product over another. Think about what you're wearing right now. Why did you choose that outfit? Erin, that's a nice sweater you have on there. What made you decide to put that on this morning? Yeah. Sweet.
Well, first of all, it's cozy and it's Saturday morning, but I like the color, keeps me warm, and it's very soft. So that's what I was feeling like this morning.
You look very professional wearing that today too. So
well, typically I'd be wearing a blazer, but let's be real, you guys. Comfort over fashion these days.
Okay. Well, this morning I chose to wear the shirt that I have on for a number of reasons. First, it's a 4-H shirt, and I am proud to be associated with the 4-H program. And I wear 4-H shirts, hoodies, jackets to a lot of functions, and especially 4-H functions. That's the main reason I wore it today. Second, this is my favorite 4-H shirt. And another reason, it was clean. And the fourth reason, it fit. And you know what? I never really thought about it much until I stopped to think about it. And that's the way it is with most of the decisions that you make daily. You don't really think about it, but you're actually making decisions, choosing one thing over another. Okay. Many of you probably have more experience with multi-species judging or livestock judging. And in a lot of ways, consumer decision making is very similar. Judging involves the ranking of 4 items or animals from the closest to the ideal to the least favorable. The basic format remains the same for both types of judging. But there are 3 main differences between consumer decision making and multi-species judging. First, instead of a clinician explaining what they are looking for in the ideal animal the day of the show, you are given a study guide for each class a few days before the competition. You should really read these. A good study guide should cover all of the things you need to know to make your decisions. Now, for the keeners. Once you have the study guide, you know what items you will be judging. There's really nothing stopping you from searching for additional information on the class. Look at websites of companies that manufacture the items. Lots of times they will list product specifications, have terms that are commonly used to describe them. They'll have safety procedures and definitions. And don't forget to look at clothing tags, as they have how to care for the items and what they're made from, and also food labels and the nutritional information on them. The more that you know, the easier it will be to make your decisions and give your reasons and sound like you actually know what you're talking about. Secondly, there should always be a budget. Unless you're independently wealthy, there will be times that you just can't afford the best item in the class. If you can't afford it, it has to place last. And finally, there is a story or a scenario to follow. The scenario explains the needs or wants and other criteria that are required to rank the class. Your placings of the class could change depending on the information contained in the scenario. For instance, you wouldn't place a 24 horsepower, 0-turn John Deere riding mower first to mow the backyard of your duplex. On the other hand, you wouldn't place the 110-volt electric mower first to mow the grass in the ditch at your acreage. The scenario explains why you should be considering and what you should be considering when making your placings. Okay, since we are talking about consumer decision making today, I will not make any more references to multi-species judging. If I start using livestock for examples, please stop me. Referring to livestock when discussing consumer decision making can be confusing, especially to members who don't understand livestock. Okay, any questions at all?
Any questions? Put up your hand, throw it in the chat. We good?
I will continue.
Good.
Okay, next up is the scenario. The scenario is vital to properly judging any class at a competition. It provides the information like who is buying the product, their age, and who they are buying the product for and their age. And the criteria of that product must fit. For instance, if you're buying tires to put on my vehicle, it would be good to know whether they were going on my minivan or my hunting wagon. Also, you should know where I'll be driving. If I'm headed to Quebec in the winter, the tires need a little snowflake on the sidewall. Why a snowflake? What's a sidewall? You should have learned that in the study guide. The scenario will also let you know if the end user has any food or other allergies, a preference of color, size, activity, whatever. The list goes on of what could be in the scenario, but the main thing is that the scenario will give you all of the information you need to make the correct decision. Another piece of information for every scenario is the budget. If the scenario only says that all of the items are within budget, it's still a budget. Remember that if an item is over the budget, it must be placed last. Also, keep in mind that the budget might only cover the cost of an item, but you may have to purchase additional pieces to make it work. A few years ago, we judged a class of bear archery bows. And by bear archery bow, I mean you needed to add sights and arrows to make it functional. The best bow in the class was over budget once you bought the sights, and there was no money left for arrows. You could buy the bow, but it wouldn't be much fun. It placed last. So, of course, along with any other competition, there's rules. First up, this is an individual competition. No help from other competitors, parents, or leaders. And no talking between members, unless you're an authorized assistant, and that's an assistant that helps some of our members with special needs, then you are exempt. If you have a question, ask the room monitor or the member wrangler. Please, no cell phones. Can you believe that we actually had people texting answers to competitors? We had to threaten to take away their phones. Another thing that we need to talk about is don't touch the items in the class unless the room monitor says it's okay. Businesses have provided them for our use. Please don't break them. And stay with the group that you have been assigned. That keeps all the groups at about the same size. If you must leave the group for any reason, please let the group wrangler know. And the last rule, have fun. Just because it's a competition doesn't mean you can't enjoy yourself. And rules will change depending on the competition. Down in the South, sometimes we're pretty lenient with the rules that we have. If you're in a more important competition, they might be a lot stricter with rules. Any questions? We're all good. Okay. So on to our next topic, how is judging done? During a consumer decision-making competition, once you enter the room monitor will read you the scenario. You're required to stay back away from the items for the first 2 minutes. In that time, you'll hear the scenario, and then at the same time, take a look at the items all together. Look at the different sizes, features, packaging, and compare them. Once the 2 minutes are up, move in for a closer look. Are all of the items within the budget? Does one stick out as being better or worse than the rest? Decide on your rankings, mark your scorecard, then start organizing your reasons for placing them the way you did. Write down your reasons on a separate piece of paper, not on your scorecard, then present them orally to the reason marker. We usually allow younger or less experienced members to use their written reasons, but older, more experienced members should give the reasons from memory. This all needs to be done in a short period of time. Usually we allow 20 minutes or less. So, as I mentioned earlier, you would be given a scorecard to mark your placings on and then hand in. You should have one that was sent to you along with the Honey Study Guide. It's just the yellow one there, and it lists all the different combinations for judging. Your placings are worth a total of 50 points. Then you'll give your reasons orally to someone who marks you on how you explain your rankings. Your reasons are worth another 50 points for a total of 100 possible points. One thing to remember is that the person listening to your reasons is marking you on how well you explain your rankings, not on how you rank them. In other words, you don't have to have the official order correct. You just have to be able to explain why you ranked them the way you did. You will be judging more than just one class of products at a competition. Make sure that you have the correct class name and that you're handing in the correct scorecard for the class. So,
Any
once
questions?
Again, any questions? Any comments? Anything at all? Okay. Okay, so we're moving on to the 10 steps of consumer decision making. It's the day of the competition, so obviously you have already read all of the study guides. Everybody nod your head. Let's look a little closer at the steps involved in making an informed decision. First up, consider the scenario. Think of all the relevant information and details in the story. What is the budget? Secondly, picture the ideal. Let's go back to the tires for a minute. I decided they are for my hunting wagon. In your mind, what would the ideal tire look like? Next, prepare to compare. How do the items compare to how you ranked, to how you pictured them? Is there one that looks a lot like your ideal? Is there one that strikes you as the opposite of your ideal? Once again, move back and view them from a distance. Are there noticeable differences between the 4 items, or are they all very similar? View from all sides as well. Walk around the items. Is there something important that you might have missed if you had just viewed them from one spot? Does one of the tires have raised lettering or a white wall? I bet you're glad you read the study guide. By now, you should be formulating your rankings. Next, move in close and take a really good look. Are all of the items within your budget? Do any of them have a little snowflake on them? Do any of them say implement tire only? Important words, important messages. Okay, on to number 7. Step back and view from a distance again. Is there anything that you noticed up close that makes you change your mind about the ranking? Were they all within the budget? Are the tires all legal for highway use? If you can't afford one, you know where it places. Even an illegal tire is better than no tire at all. Then number 8, once you've looked them all over, make your decision. If the closest to your ideal is within the budget, it should place first. The one most opposite of the ideal should place last. The items closest to your ideal should place higher. Number 9, mark these reasons on your card. Ensure that you mark the correct card for the class and make sure that you mark the order that you want. And then number 10, prepare your reasons. Consider each pair in your placings and why you ranked one higher than another.
Okay.
Once again.
That was lots of
Any more
information, you guys. Does anyone have any questions about any of those 10 steps? Because that's the process that you'll think through every time that you're looking at a brand new class. So you can raise your hand or put a question in the chat, but if it's all making sense so far, that's awesome. And we can keep rolling. So Brody has a question. Are there always 4 items to pick for or pick between, or can it be different? What do you think, Clancy?
Well, usually, yes, usually they are always 4 items. I have not been to a competition. I have not watched or seen any competitions where there were more or less. 4 is the ideal number. It fits on your scorecard. It's pretty well always 4.
Yeah, because
when
we think about 4, then we have an obvious first and last place. Sometimes it's a little not as obvious. And then we also have the middle pair. And when we talk about pairs, we talk about first and second place, second and third place, third and fourth place. And so as we'll talk about when you're preparing your oral reasons, you're comparing those pairs as you go along to decide why number 1 placed over number 2, why number 2 placed over number 3. So that's why 4 items works really well as well.
I just noticed the question.
Yes.
I just noticed the question. Did we really need to read that honey study guide?
Oh, guys, that thing is, it's everything. It's so important.
I caught Aaron on that the other night.
Clancy totally did.
Really, yes. Oh yeah.
I learned the hard way.
On her.
I learned the hard way, you guys. I didn't read the study guide, so then I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
So
there's a pretty good chance if you haven't read it yet, it's not very long. We'll probably go over the study guide as well. Oh, where can you find the study guide? Okay.
Thanks, Mom. Good work, Mom. And yeah, like Henry and Stacy said, in 4-H competitions, there are always 4 items. In real life, there's so many more. So that's why we talk about maybe like the criteria, right? So what are we looking for when we're judging items out in the real world? That's what this all is all about, is practicing that critical decision making. And yes, we can go over the honey study guide. It's not too complicated. I can bring it up on the computer. We'll take the time to go through it. But the point is, if you decide to sign up and go compete in an upcoming consumer decision-making competition, you're going to get the study guides for whatever classes. There could be multiple classes. And it's good for you to take the time to read through them before you even go to the competition. You got to do your homework so that you know what to talk about, right? So that you can make those informed decisions.
We did a class on electric fencers just a couple of years ago now, and it was obvious. And the study guide wasn't that hard. I wrote it myself. It wasn't that long. It was there was no reason for it, but I don't think anybody read that study guide. And there wasn't one person that got the correct placing on the items because they did not read the study guide. I actually had one of the reason markers when I gave him the official placings. He questioned me on them. And he says, "Are you sure this is right?" And I said, "The study guide." "Yes, you're right." The study guide is very important. Read the study guide, study the study guide. There's lots of stuff in there. Anyway, are there any more questions, or should we continue on with talking about the oral reasons?
There was another question. Can you do a consumer decision-making competition virtually? Oh, I see Aaron answered it.
Okay,
yeah,
yes,
but
absolutely.
we can chat about that. What do you think, Clancy?
Oh yeah, it's very easy. We did a judging competition that wasn't consumer decision making. I'm not going to use the word livestock. Last year, virtually down in the south. It was, well, we had to change a number of things, but actually for a class for consumer decision making, the items would be a lot easier to go through than multi-species judging when it comes to a virtual class. And there's actually some classes that I have put out there that could be used for practice as well. And you could go over them in your own spare time. So yeah, no problem at all doing a virtual class for consumer decision making.
Yeah, and Jody put in the chat that the SALT committee is trying to put a consumer decision making class in their newsletter once a month for clubs to use for practice. So there's lots of great discussion happening here, and we can definitely talk through some of the logistics. It seems like there was a multi-species competition done online. So it's possible, and maybe that's something we can chat about as we talk with our leaders and organizers in the second half of the webinar. So let's put a pin in that for now, and Clancy, let's head on to preparing oral reasons.
Okie dokie. Oral reasons explain why you placed the items in the order that you did. When discussing the class, use words that relate to the items that are being judged. For instance, with the tires, tread, sidewalls, inflation pressure, DOT markings. Your reasons should be short, definite, and accurate. The reason markers have all seen and read the same things as you. Don't try to feed them information that's wrong. If it's not right, don't use it. Make sure that your reasons are accurate and pertain to the class. When you're delivering oral reasons, while making a decision and placing the class correctly is important, being able to defend your position is even more important. Presenting your reasons is a lot like saying a speech, an impromptu, and many of the same rules apply. For instance, stand up straight in front of the judges, make eye contact, remove hats, caps, or other headgear, and set down your notebook. Yes, of course, you're going to be using your notes. Dress comfortably, but be tidy and wear clean clothes. Speak confidently, enunciate your words, and project your voice, but don't yell at the reason marker. Use comparative terms when giving your reasons, why one item placed above another. Use wording that describes the products in a complementary way. You should never put down one product over another. Use words that build the product up. For instance, say, chainsaw number 2 had a longer cutting bar and 20 cc's larger engine than chainsaw 4. Not chainsaw 4 was smaller and had less power. Once you have your oral reasons all figured out, practice them once or twice before you say them to the reason marker. Make your delivery flow together and sound natural. Don't forget to smile. You're having fun. Honest, you really are. You will probably, we usually give about 20 minutes to give the reasons. And for the most part, you should be able to figure out your actual ranking or placings probably within the first 5, 6, 7 minutes. After that, take the rest of the time to go over your reasons. Practice. It's like a speech. Practice it a couple times. Then when you go to give it to the reason marker, it'll sound like you know what you're talking about. So. Okay. Place in a class. Here are the components that you should have in your reasons. First, you should have an opening or introductory statement. Give the name of the class and the order of the placing. I place this class of cowboy boots 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure that what you give as your placings matches the judging card that you just handed in. I've marked reasons several times, and I've had members say that I placed this class 1, 2, 3, 4, and they had written down on their card that it was 1, 3, 4, 2. And I've had to stop and question which one's the truth here, you know. And in a more critical competition, the reason marker might not do that. So make sure that the ones that your rankings match what you're handing in on the card. Okay, next, make a general statement to how you saw the class as a whole. For instance, I found this class was easy to judge with an obvious choice for the top position. Then talk about your top placing. These are the reasons why that product first. The Muck boots were the obvious top choice because of their excellent traction, their durability, and they are waterproof. I actually got in a little bit of trouble over that placing. There were a lot of people out there that didn't consider the Muck boots to be cowboy boots. And I had a lot of people disagreeing with me on that.
I would disagree.
Anyway.
Riding boots are supposed to have a heel. Muck boots don't have a heel.
The Muck boots in my competition had a heel. You could ride in those boots. There was nothing stopping you from riding in those boots.
Alrighty
and
then.
They were the best. They were the best for mucking out stalls, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure.
Anyway.
I'm sure.
Yeah, there were a few people that disagreed. And furthermore, when it got to the actual scenario, the final sentence read, what boot would be the best for the person to buy? It didn't say cowboy boot. It said what boot. So everybody, yeah, okay, I guess that's right. So anyway, back to it here. There are 3 pairs in your placings and reasons. Aaron actually mentioned it a little bit before. A top pair, that's your first and second place. A middle pair, second and third place. And a bottom pair, third and fourth place. So once you've made your opening statement and you've talked about the first place item, now you compare each of the 3 pairs. Give reasons for placing first place over second, second place over third, and third place over fourth. Be specific when you are making your comparisons. Once again, always explain why one item is superior to the next in positive or complementary terms. Once you have finished comparing your pairs, you should say a bit about the fourth placed item. Once again, try to give the reasons for the item placing in the most complimentary way possible. So you can say that, okay, for mucking out the stalls, the fashion boot, just, you know, it's a beautiful boot and everything, but it just wasn't meant to be mucking out stalls in. So anyway, okay, so I should take a moment to talk about grants. A grant is an admission that something about the product you placed lower is better than the product placed higher. It just didn't make enough of a difference to place it higher. We'll show you a couple examples in a few more minutes. Later on, we'll talk a little more and we'll explain grants maybe a little bit better. Once you have finished comparing your pairs, you should make a concluding or closing statement. You should say a bit about the fourth place item. Once again, try to give reasons for placing the item last in the most complimentary way possible. Be decisive and confident. Then finally repeat the class's placings one last time. For these reasons, I place this class of cowboy boots 1, 2, 3, 4. Are there any questions at all? Everything there is mud.
Do those 5 steps make sense? Just let me make sure we're giving everybody time to chime in here.
Yeah, you betcha. I'm here for another hour and a half or so. Okay.
Awesome.
Anyway, Erin has worked really hard to put together a class for you to practice judging. So are you ready, Erin?
I am. So we had a request to go a little slower. Just so you know, the webinar itself is actually being recorded and we will be sending out the slides. So again, we want you to try to be present with us right now. Don't worry about taking notes. I know it's a lot to learn up front for anyone who's never learned about this before, but that's why we sent out lots of resources before we started, and we'll send some more out after. And you can also talk to your area coordinator, and I'm sure you've got an expert in every region on consumer decision making. Clancy would be one in the South region. So there's lots of places to keep learning. And Cody and Alyssa, yes. So we have the 4 items, and when we're talking about pairs, we talk about first and second place, second and third place, third and fourth place. Totally right. Any other questions?
And I do have to apologize for going a little fast. I am nervous too. And so I'll try to slow down a bit.
No, and if, and make sure you're just asking questions as we go along. If there's something that you're like, whoa, 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 wait, I don't get that one. That's what we're here for. Do you have to hand it in? Yes. So you have 2 pieces here. So you have your marking card, the card to write down your placings. So if we did decide, then make sure that you know which item is which number. That's another thing that can get confusing. So when we're talking about the individual items, there's 4 of them. Make sure you know, okay, maybe the pretty cowboy boot is item number 1, and the muck boot is item number 4. And like Clancy said, the muck boot placed first in the class, so the placing would be number 4, maybe number 2 and 3, and then number 1 is the last. So the placing card, exactly. So for every class, you're given a card to write down your order, your rankings. You then hand in that placing card to the reason marker, the judge, before you give your oral reasons. So the judge gets the card where you've written down those 4 items in the order that you're ranking them. And like Clancy said, then when you step back and start giving the oral reasons, you want to make sure that you're talking about them in the order that you've just handed in.
Okay. Excuse me, Erin. Do you have the card that I sent you there? Would you be able to bring it up on the screen, or could somebody bring it up on the screen?
Yeah, 1 second.
We're getting quite a few questions on it, and it might be the easiest way to explain it is if we have the card in front of us there.
Absolutely.
And we'll just talk a little bit. We will talk about the cowboy boots, the placing 1, 2, 3, 4. And when you go into the room, I didn't really mention this, but each one of the items, each one of the 4 items will have a number assigned to it. Number 1, 2, 3, 4. And those are the numbers you use when you are placing your class. They're the numbers. So, okay, let's say, cowboy boot number 2 was actually ranked as first place. So you would put down
is
number
this the
2.
one we're thinking of, Clancy?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yes,
okay.
It is. Okay.
Woohoo.
So we'll just look at it here. And okay, let's say the official placing was 2, 3, 1, 4. So you look at all these, you go down, and a ways down the first column there, you see the combination of 2, 3, 1, 4. Right there, yeah. And so you would go and mark that one. You'd put a check mark there showing that that is the one that you wanted to make the placings correct. So cowboy boot number 2 placed first, cowboy boot number 3 placed second, cowboy boot number 4 placed cowboy boot number cowboy boot number 4 placed 2 3. Did I say 2 3 4 1? Yeah. See, that's where it comes in. Okay, we'll use that then. So number 4 cowboy boot placed third, and number 1 placed fourth. And so that's how you show your marking. So I placed this class of cowboy boots 2 3 1 4, and so you'd put a check mark there. And then once everything gets tallied up and everything, in your value for placing up at the top, you would get 50 points for that because you got the combination dead on. That is what the actual one was, and that's what you got. So, and you can see different combinations, and we'll talk about splits later on again. But the further away from the actual that you get, the lower number of points you get for placing. But you have this one over here that says value for reasons. This is where your talking makes up the difference. If you can explain why you placed that class in a different order from the official one and do a good job of it, you can get points right up to 50 points as well. So it says make your selection by marking X. Okay, yeah, not a check mark, make an X. So there you go. And so when your reason marker takes the card from you, they will fill in the value for reasons, and then they will hand the card in, and then the staff in the office will decide on the value for your placings. Everybody gives a contestant's number. We don't use our names on the cards. That way you can't play favorites for anybody. And then the class. This class was called Cowboy Boots. So that's what you write there. And a lot of times the cards will already have your numbers on them, and will already have the class on them as well. So are we going to judge a class today? Well, yes. Okay. Yeah. Yes, we are. We're going to judge the honey cookies. So are there any more questions about the card? That was, I'm glad we brought that up, and I'm glad, Erin, thank you for bringing that up on the screen as well.
No worries.
I hope that cleared up a lot for everybody. The cards were sent out to people. It's not necessary to have the card today. We won't be handing anything in or anything. It's just to show you what to look for when you get to a competition. It'll be a card similar to this. There are other types. There are some that are just, you just write the numbers in for first place, and others that are only, and there are some that are for written reasons as well. So they'll have a little space at the top where you write the number, and then underneath is where you give all your reasons. We usually use oral reasons, and that's why we're going with this today.
So another pro tip before we move on, because when I was doing these consumer decision making competitions, if there were 5 classes I was looking at that day, and then you would get 5 cards at the beginning of the day, and those are your responsibility to take care of them. What I did to make sure I was very clear to keep it organized for myself for the 5 different classes, maybe one's cowboy boots, maybe one is snow tires. There could be all, please do not annotate the slides as we go along. I forgot to mention that earlier. It makes it hard for all of us to stay on the same page. What I would recommend everybody to do with your 5 cards, or however many you get at the start of the day, write down your contestant number on all of them and write down the 5 different class names. And then as you're going through and deciding on your rankings, you're not getting them mixed up. Just another thing to help you keep organized.
Like I said, usually in the South, we've filled out the contestant numbers and the classes beforehand. They're already on there. It's just a matter of making sure that, easy. But you'd be surprised at how many people accidentally hand in the wrong card. They just haven't looked at the top and filled it out. And, it's not so bad if all of the rankings are the same for each class, but a lot of times they're not. Most of the time they're not.
And we have some questions about writing down the pencils. Don't worry too much we're just going to breeze through this first example pretty quickly, and I'll lead us through that. But it's good to keep in mind, maybe you want to take a screenshot of the card or open it up on the link that Jody so wonderfully put in the chat for us. Hopefully that will clear us up with a few questions, and then we can be talking about the pencil class. So everyone feel comfortable moving on for now? Okay, so I'm gonna open back up our slides here. And like really great questions, you guys. This is awesome. This is exactly what we need, because when we're planning on what we're gonna talk about, we can only anticipate so much. And so this helps us make sure that you're getting what you need from us today to understand. So that's awesome. All right, the pencil class. This is a really quick and easy one. This is one, for example, that, well, these, I'll be honest, I got off a document from maybe 2006. So you can see the picture itself is not the easiest, the best to use in order to actually judge this class. So with that in mind, we'll just walk through in principle. But this is something that could possibly be done virtually, is this sort of class where if you can show a picture of the 4 items, it's enough information for the members to make decisions. So the pencil class. We have 4 items here in our class, 4 different pencils. And we're being asked to place the pencils in order, first, second, third, fourth, based upon length, size of eraser, and sharpness. And so this will be the 3 pieces of criteria that you will pick out of the scenario and the study guide. So when we take a first look here for length, size of eraser, and sharpness, we do have a diverse class here. Okay, so we already have some, yeah, put your rankings in the chat. What do we think we're looking at here? Think about, so length, size of eraser, and sharpness. What would be first, second, and third, and fourth place? To me, there's a very obvious first and fourth place. But yeah, it looks like we got a consensus here. Okay, okay.
I thought we decided at the beginning that this was an individual competition.
I know, typically we wouldn't do it this way, guys. We're all collaborating, but that's okay because we're learning. We're learning. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next slide now. Everyone seems like we're making an initial reaction here to what this could possibly be placed as. So again, how would you place the class? What are we thinking about as we're making these rankings? Oh, this is awesome. I love this. Okay. So it seems like everyone's got, I know, and Bertha, the sharpness is the crappy part about the picture. I'll be honest, because even if the picture on the side here, again, with 1, 2, 3, 4, when we're judging on sharpness, it's hard to see what the sharpness actually is in this case. So that one is, you know, part of the picture, but not one that we can accurately judge right now because of the picture itself of these pencils. So that's really awesome. Everyone seems like they've got a good idea of how they would place this class based on those 3 pieces of criteria. Oh, I think someone isn't muted. Can we please mute? It's great discussion. Great discussion from what I heard. So something that we can do to help us judge a class. So this one, again, the pencils, it can be a little obvious, right? It's not the most difficult class to judge. Okay, Bertha, that's great. Glad that you can see it better now. A tool that we can use for some of the more difficult classes is to create a matrix. And so this is something I just wanted to share with you, maybe for our older or more seasoned members as a value add today. So this is something that you can quickly sketch out. This is something that I quickly sketched out when I had difficult classes where even if it was 1 pair, I couldn't decide maybe what second and third place was. Maybe first and fourth place were very obvious, but that mid pair, I just wasn't sure. This is a tool that we can use. So the way that we set this up is we have across the top, the 4.
I said I put the volcano in there.
Oh, we have someone who needs to mute. I think Madeline will help us out with that. So we have class items being judged across the top. So that would be, for example, pencil number 1 is this column. Pencil number 2 is this column. Pencil number 3 and pencil number 4, okay? So whether we were doing all 4 items or just 1 single pair, the class items go across the top. Okay, then we have, okay, what are we basing our decision on? What are we looking for out of each of these items to see if they fit the criteria? So in this case, we have the longest pencil. We're looking for length. We're looking for the sharpest point. So we're looking for the sharpness of the point. And then the biggest eraser is the third piece of criteria. Can I get thumbs up if that's making sense so far and how we actually set up the matrix? Okay, cool, awesome, love that. So as we go along now, so let's look at pencil number 1 specifically. And so that's this one here. He's looking a little bedraggled, right? Looks like someone's been chewing on his eraser. So what we have, we're looking at maybe the longest pencil first. That's the piece of criteria we're looking for. And so when we consider number 1 in terms of the longest pencil, well, it looks like it's the shortest pencil, right? Would we agree? So that would mean that number 1, for this piece of criteria, the length of the pencil, it's the worst one. If we were judging on that reason alone, it would be last place. So we put an X through it. The second pencil here, number 2, well, it looks like it's the second longest. So it would get a plus mark here. It would be easiest for us to go for number 1 being the worst, the shortest pencil in this case. And then number 3, we can see obviously is the longest pencil. So then it gets 2 thumbs up. Does that make sense? How we're looking at the easiest, the worst, and the best for the length of the pencil? Okay, let's look at the sharpest point now, which again with the picture can be difficult. So when we're looking at the sharpness of the point, it looks like number 4 is pretty dull. Okay, so that would be, it's the worst of the 4 for that criteria. What's easier to judge maybe for the sharpest point is number 3. Number 3 is looking pretty sharp. I think that it's the best out of the sharpest point if we're talking about that criteria. So 2 thumbs up for number 3. And when we're talking about the biggest eraser, well, number 1 has just been gnawed down to the veriest bit. So number 1 is the worst out of the 4. It's got the smallest eraser, so it'll get an X. And then number 3, oh, it just looks pristine. No one's been nibbling on that eraser. So that number 3 has the biggest eraser. So we would give that one 2 thumbs up. So when we're looking now through the class, and we have, again, some mid-range. So we had number 1 is the sharpest point. Well, it's the second worst. It's the second dullest point. When we have this kind of, just the single plus mark, that means, it's good, but it isn't the best of the 4. So those would be kind of the middle pair placings there. Okay, okay, we got some good feedback here. Oh, I know, Pat, it's the absolute worst when that happens. So now that we're looking at, so we have our matrix filled out. And again, we're doing this for the total 4 items of the class. And we could even compare just number 3 and 4 if we were trying to split a pair in some case. This is a tool you can use whether you're comparing all 4 items or just 2 items out of the class. So now let's look at the results. Okay, so I think most everybody was on the same page with the rankings for the class, but I'll tell you how the matrix helps us make this decision. So when we went along and we looked at each of the 4 items in each criteria, right? So remember we talked about the longest pencil, number 3 was obviously the best, number 1 was the shortest. All of these little comparisons, these little choices that we made as we filled out our chart. Then when we look vertically, we see, okay, number 3 is obviously number 1. Number 3 is first place, goodness gracious, because it has 10s across the board. It's the best, it's the obvious front runner here. Second place, we can look at, okay, well, pencil number 2, it had 2 thumbs up and 1 thumbs down, and it wasn't the worst in any case. So that should be put in second place. Number 4 had 1 criteria where it was the worst, but it wasn't the worst of the class out of the criteria we're looking at. So that one should probably be in third place. Number 1, again, we had an obvious top and bottom. to this class, and that's something we could say in our general statement. We could use our opening statement. I place this class of pencils as 3, 2, 4, 1. And in this class of pencils, there was an obvious top and bottom choice. That's something we could say when we're giving our oral reasons. But the reason why pencil number 1 got last place was because, look, we have 2 criteria here where it was the worst item in the class. So can I just get some thumbs up where that makes sense? So how we set up the matrix, how we go through and compare the items to make those itty bitty decisions, and then how we look at the columns going down to help us make our decisions based on those little bitty choices we made throughout. Awesome. And again, you can use this for, for 2 items. So say, for example, we knew number 3 and number 1, very obvious that number 3 was the first place item, number 1 was the 4th place item. Even if we just had pencil number 2 and pencil number 4, I know that would help me make an informed decision going through and being critical of each criteria that I'm looking for. So I just wanted to take the time to walk through that and show that to you. And let's take a minute now to walk through oral reasons for this class. And I already started going into this a little bit. So we have, remember those 5 pieces, which I combined number 1 and 2. So we have our opening and general statement. Then we compare each of the pairs out of the 4 items. We talk about admissions or grants. And then we have our conclusion and closing statement where we reiterate the rankings of the class. So let's take a look. And this is handy, we have this example already written out for us. So opening statement. I place this class of pencils 3, 2, 4, 1. Did everybody decide 3, 2, 4, 1 when we went through it? That made sense? Cool. General statement about the class. I found this class of pencils easy to judge with a definite top and definite bottom. I considered the length of the pencil and eraser and sharpness of the point when placing the class. So there we're reiterating the criteria that we made our judgments on to decide which one got which ranking. So reasons for placing the first pair, which is pencil number 3 and 2. So I placed pencil number 3 over pencil number 2 because 3 is the longest pencil with the sharpest point and biggest eraser, while number 2 has a much smaller eraser and is somewhat shorter. Then we talk about our second pair, which is pencil number 2 over pencil number 4. That's our middle pair. I placed pencil number 2 over pencil number 4 because pencil 2 is longer than pencil 4 with a sharper point. Oh, and wait, now we have an admission or grant, because remember that middle pair was a little close. Because pencil 4, it wasn't the worst of the class, it did have a bigger eraser. So we can say that. Pencil 4, however, has a bigger eraser than pencil number 2. So it's not all bad, and we can acknowledge that. Then we'll talk about our third pair, the bottom pair, which is pencil 4 and pencil 1. And pencil 1 was the worst. That thing looks like it's been through a war. So I placed pencil number 4 over pencil number 1 because pencil 4 is longer than pencil 1 and it has a bigger eraser. But then again, we can say something nice about pencil 1, you know, because it's still a contender, it's still in the class. So pencil number 1 has a sharper point than pencil number 4. But pencil 4 could be sharpened because it's longer still and could still be about the size of pencil number 1 by the time it's all done. And reasons for our bottom placing. I placed number 1 last. It got 4th place out of the class because it is the shortest pencil of the 4 with an eraser that not only is the smallest, but is also black and might smear. So we couldn't necessarily judge if it was black and could smear, but that's what we're being told in this example. So if you were handling the pencils and if that pencil number 1, the one that looks like it's been through the war, had that black nitty gritty gross eraser, then it could possibly smudge. And that's something you'd be able to tell by getting up close and possibly handling the items if this was a class we were judging in person. And so finally, to finish this off, talking to the judge, the reason taker, conclusion or closing statement where we reiterate the placing of our class. Therefore, I place this class of pencils 3, 2, 4, 1. And that's it. We did it. we went through, we made our decisions, we took a look at things. So this is just a simple example of start to finish how a class might work. And I just had, this isn't the pencil example now, but just another oral reasons example and how we break it down into those 5 different pieces that we talked about, those 5 different components. So our opening statement: after careful consideration of color and nutrition to be added with each menu change, I place this class of menu options 3, 4, 2, 1. General statement: overall, this was a fairly easy class. In my top pair, I placed 3 over 4. And then we have a grant that 4 did add a grain, a fruit, a vegetable, and dairy. So it looks like in this class, we were judging menu options based on what we need for nutrition in each meal. So we go along and we have a comparison of each pair again, and we have admission or grants saying, you know, this item, this option wasn't all bad. It did have, you know, did fit, excuse me, a piece of the criteria, but it just wasn't superior overall. And then we have, again, the closing statement. Just to recap, for these reasons that I just talked about to you, I place this class of menu options 3, 4, 2, 1. Can I get some thumbs up? I just want to make sure that we're doing good and this is all making sense. Oh, Tracy says, could we say I place pencil 4 over pencil 2 because although pencil 4 is duller than pencil 2, pencil 4 is still usable and has a larger eraser? Yeah, I don't see why not, including the grant in the placing statement. What do you think, Clancy? Could we put a grant in the placing statement to close it out? I mean, I've done that before as a member. I don't think that there's a restriction on that.
Yeah, you can do it. Just try to remember, once again, that we don't want to put things down. Instead of saying duller, just not as sharp as the rest or something like that, just to make it sound better. Always strive to make it sound the best possible that it can.
Totally, and this is one of the faults of this example of the pencil class is when we talk about the reasons, oopsie, we can just go back here. They do talk about the item that's placed lower in the pair negatively versus saying we can talk about, okay, I placed 3 over 2 because 3 is the longest pencil with the sharpest point, biggest eraser. It was obviously, pencil number 3 was just immaculate. It was perfect, brand new pencil. So instead of saying, well, 2 has a much smaller eraser and is somewhat shorter, we could say, well, pencil number 2, oh boy, I'm thinking on the fly here. It's been a minute, you guys. Well, pencil number 2 is not as long and has an eraser that has been used. Could say something maybe like that. So just soften it to make it a little friendly. It's us, I think it's kind of sweet actually when I think about it, because then us as, you know, judgment makers, as the competitors, we're still trying to be nice to everybody, you guys. We're saying, well, these 4 items, they all have merit. They're all included in this class as an option for a reason. There's still something good about them, because it reminds me of how we try to think about people sometimes is, well, maybe they're driving me crazy, but there are good things about them too. So I just think it's a little difficult. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it is difficult to actually come up with reasons that are complementary to it and to an item. When we do the honey class, you'll see what we mean about that too. It is difficult.
Yeah, that's the thing, is this really challenges, well, my brain too, but everybody's brain, I think, until you practice this and get into the habit, it does takes a lot of thought and consideration, and it's good work for your brain to think about all these things and how you might position all of them. So, and yes, Dawson and Mila say you don't want to hurt the pencil's feelings. Exactly. So just before I hand things over to Clancy again, just a few final tips for judging. So like in the pencil class, we talked about first and last place were very obvious. They were easy. So do those easiest placings first. If they're obvious, go for it. That's part of your decision making, is using your brain and saying, okay, well, that one does fit all the criteria. That's an obvious first place. Or that one, remember, if you can't afford it, it goes last. So if you're thinking, I can't actually afford that one with the budget I've been given, automatically last. Easy decision. So don't overthink things. Trust first impressions and go with your gut. You've read your study guide, you know what you're looking for. If something seems obvious, or if you think, yeah, that makes most sense, trust your gut. Compare, compare, and compare again. This is where maybe that comparison matrix can come into play and help you out. Think it through. Consider each of the items' attributes, each of their features, and apply the scenario. And so the way the matrix helps you with that is, even again, if you're looking at two of the items, you can say, well, I'm just not sure at first glance which of these is superior. Then we can go through and say, okay, well, we're looking for X, Y, Z. These are the things I'm looking for. So how do these two items measure up? And the reasons are important. Like we talked about with the scorecard, there's 50 points for getting the proper order, for the proper ranking. And we're just going to keep rolling, you guys. We have until noon technically for everything to fit in. We might run a little bit over noon, but we're just going to keep going here. We could be done by 11:45. We have just a little bit more to get through here. So I appreciate you buckling up and staying with us. So finally, reasons are important. So again, even if you place the class out of order, if one of those really close pairs you didn't get exactly right in terms of what was decided beforehand, points for oral reasons are also a large part of your score. So if you do a really good job explaining why you picked one over the other and going through that whole process, if you really nail those oral reasons, you can still get really great points. Okay, so I'm going to hand it over now to Clancy, and we're going to talk about this honey cookie example. So what I might do, Clancy, is I'll work on bringing up the study guide while you introduce this. How does that sound?
Sounds fantastic. I just have my study guide in front of me here, and I think it'll be handy. And we will, it's not that long. It won't take long to go through it. So anyway, yeah, we judged the class of honey a few years ago. It's a pretty simple class, and I thought it would make a good example for today. It won't take too long. Once again, you normally get close to 20 minutes to do this. We'll go through it a lot quicker than that, mainly because I made up the class and I know the answers. So without further ado, are you able to get it up, Erin? Or?
You bet. Just got to share the screen here.
Okay.
Can everyone see that okay?
It
awesome.
Looks fantastic.
I see some thumbs up. Cool, cool.
Okay, here's the study guide. Short and sweet. Sweet. Anyway, Canada is the world's 11th largest producer of honey, with Alberta producing over 40% of Canada's honey production. Alberta is the home to over 25,000 colonies, which is over 40% of the honeybee colonies in Canada. It is Alberta's large, beautiful agricultural land base that is the source of the abundant nectar, producing plants bees use to stay healthy and make honey. The honey produced is water white to light colored, creating a mild tasting honey that has consumers always buzzing for more. Alberta's honey producers are leaders in the industry with the highest standards in food safety and quality assurance. Okay, here we go. That's a little introduction to it. Honey definition. Honey, a sweet, sticky material produced out of the nectar of flowers and converted to honey in the special stomach of a honeybee. As the definition suggests, honey can be very different depending on the source of nectar the bees are foraging from. Due to this, over the years, we have seen a variety of different honeys produced in the same geographical region. The majority of honey produced in Western Canada is canola, alfalfa, and sweet clover. Most of the honey in Alberta is produced from canola, and the flavor doesn't vary much. Honey from other sources like buckwheat are used in niche markets because of their unique flavor and can be very expensive. Not only do these plant varieties produce great honey, but also provide bees with great nutrition. Okay, now we're going to talk about the different ways that honey is sold. Liquid honey has been heated to 160 degrees Fahrenheit to melt the honey crystals and filtered, 12 to 60 micron, to remove material and unmelted crystals. The filtering removes the largest crystals that would likely increase the speed at which the honey will crystallize. In this state, it is unstable in the sense that it naturally wants to go back to crystallizing. Although packers are careful not to damage the honey, heating and filtering can create a darker honey with a sharper taste, bite, and inadvertently kill or remove the pollen, propolis, wax, and other enzymes that make honey, honey. Often consumers will want liquid honey because of how convenient it is to work with, but once it is opened, it starts to crystallize to its original state. Gentle heating will return it to liquid, but once again, overheating can change the flavor. So creamed honey is gently warmed, non-organic 130 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to flow, loosely filtered, 200 micron, and then is purposely recrystallized. Small crystals grow and propagate to create a very smooth creamed honey. Hardness depends on floral sources, moisture levels, and storage temperatures. Creamed honey is not as well known because not all areas of the world have the flowers that produce a high-quality creamed honey. Often consumers will want creamed honey because of its high quality, natural state, flavor, and texture. Creamed honey will stay in this form indefinitely, and it is great for spreading on toast or pancakes. It has the consistency of peanut butter. Now, raw honey has not been subjected to the heat of processing, only warmed enough to flow. It contains live yeast and enzymes, bits of wax, propolis, and pollen because it has not been processed through a fine filter. Often consumers will want raw honey because it has the least amount of processing done to it, but the downside is the product can be less consistent and can be more difficult to work with. Gentle heating, placed in warm water, will soften the honey to a state that is easier to work with. Okay, some of the definitions used here were collected and everything. Okay. Anyway, comb honey is produced by honeybees and is harvested directly from the hive without any processing. The comb is hexagonal-shaped waxed cells the bees produce to store honey. Once the bee fills the cells with honey, they cap the cells off with wax, and the honey is ready to be consumed. Comb honey takes a considerable amount of resources from the hive because the bees need to produce the wax cells every time they make the comb. For every 1 pound of wax produced, the bees could have produced 7 pounds of honey. If the beekeeper keeps removing the honeycomb, the bees must replace it before they can continue producing honey. This makes comb honey considerably more expensive than any other honey products, making it unsuitable for most recipes. There's a hint. Okay, now cooking with honey. When substituting honey for granulated sugar in recipes, begin by substituting honey for up to half of the sugar called for in the recipe. This means for every cup of sugar, only use half a cup of honey because it is so much sweeter. For baked goods, make sure to reduce the oven temperature by 25 degrees Fahrenheit to produce over browning. Reduce any liquid called for by 1/4 cup for each cup of honey used, and add half a teaspoon of baking soda for each cup of honey used. Because of its high fructose content, honey has higher sweetening power than sugar. This means you can use less honey than sugar to achieve the desired sweetness. There we go. In a nutshell, that is the study guide.
Yes, so I'll bring the slides back up and we'll walk through this example together. We just wanted to make sure that we had some time today to show you how it would work, and looking at the study guide is the first part, which you would do before you even show up at a competition, right? So here we go, making honey cookies.
Okay, let's continue on to the scenario. Okay, the Picture Butte Bakers is a new 4-H club. They're baking cookies as a fundraiser, and they're using honey instead of sugar. The club is planning to source local honey to create a buzz about their cookies. The club has 100 orders for a dozen cookies. The cookies sell for $7.50 per dozen. The club has to decide what kind of local honey to buy. They have a $50 budget. Okay. So, from the scenario, we can figure out that to make the most money from the fundraiser, we need to use the least expensive honey. There's also an environment. There we go. Consider if your decision will have any social, fiscal, financial, or environmental impacts. There's also the environmental element to the class as well. The containers will need to be recycled, and more packaging means more of an environmental impact. The same holds true for the processing of each product. The more processing, the larger the environmental footprint. Okay, questions? You want to switch the slide? Okay, here's the recipe. Any questions? We're good?
Making sense so far? I'll keep an eye on the chat, okay?
Okay, so the recipe calls for 5 cups of flour, 2 cups of sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of vanilla, pound of butter, and 4 eggs. What we need to worry about is the sugar. Okay, back in the study guide, remember it said that 2 cups of sugar equal 1 cup of honey. So what that means is for every 5 dozen cookies we make, we need 1 cup of honey.
And we have orders for 100 dozen cookies. So
yes,
that means when we do our quick math, we're going to need 20 cups of honey total in order to make 100 dozen cookies. Okay, so we'll just keep that number in mind. 20 cups of honey. That's what we're looking. That's what we need to buy so that we can make all of our cookies. Okay.
Okay, now let's just take a quick look at the different ones here. We have the round Ross honeycomb. It is $10. We have the liquid honey for $5 for 500 grams, which is half a kilogram. We have creamed honey, which is 1 kilogram, and it costs $9. And the raw honey is 5 kilograms and costs $35. Can you hear me?
Yep,
hello?
We can hear you.
Okay. Do you want to bring up the pictures of the different honeys?
Let's do it.
This is
we'll
the round,
take a look.
Yeah, the round Ross honeycomb. It isn't very much good for baking with, but it sure does make a very sweet chewing gum. It's great for that. Tear off a piece and you can chew it. It does take a lot away from the hives to use though. So, and it's $10 for just a little piece of comb like that. So next one, it should be the liquid honey.
Mm-hmm.
The liquid honey is 500 grams, costs $5. Glass jar, squeezable bottle. Okay, let's move on to the creamed honey. 1 kilogram costs $9 and comes in a plastic or a container or a glass jar. And then we have the raw honey. The raw honey comes in a large plastic pail with a handle, and is 5 kilograms, costs $35. So, okay, we looked at the 4. We know that 1 kilogram of honey is about the same size as 4 cups. So if we're looking for 20 cups altogether, we'd need basically 5 kilograms of honey to complete the entire recipe for 100 dozen. So, okay. Let's the round honeycomb, really it wouldn't be much good for this the project for the making of the cookies at all. So obviously that little bit of honeycomb for $10, we're going to be way over budget, and you'd have to do a lot of work to get the honey out. It just wouldn't be a very good decision to use. So obviously that goes to 4th place. So let's put that down in 4th place. And let's look at the other ones here. So basically all 3 of the products could be used in the cookie recipe. The liquid honey would be the easiest to use, but the creamed honey and the raw honey are easily warmed up and can be poured as liquid as well. So it all comes down basically to the cost. And as we've shown, the round Ross honeycomb is way too expensive. Let's move on to our 3rd place. There, placed in the class.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the liquid honey. The liquid honey would be the easiest to use, but it would use the entire honey budget to buy, because at $5 it'd be $50. You need 10 bottles. And there is a lot of packaging involved as well. So it is the most convenient, but it's the most expensive of the last three as well. So we end up putting that in third place. Let's continue on to figuring out second place here. The creamed honey is less expensive than the liquid honey and uses less packaging and refining as well. We'd only need 5 bottles of it at $9, making 45, so it's less expensive than the liquid honey as well. There's still a lot of packaging involved though. Let's go to our last slide here, or our last first place. The raw honey. The raw honey is the least expensive option and uses the least packaging and has the smallest environmental footprint. Obviously, at $35, it is the way to go. To make the most money from this class, raw honey would have to be in first place. Mm-hmm. So that's basically it. All done by math. It's just a matter of figuring out a few simple math things, and you've got your class. A lot of them will not be this easy, but we're trying to go through this quickly and figure this is a good one to use. So, okay, our final results. We know that our placings are 4, 3, 2, 1. And raw honey was number 4, creamed honey number 3, liquid honey number 2, and round Ross honeycomb was number 1. So anyway, we know that the placings are 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go over the components we need to have in our reasons again. Let's go to an introductory statement.
I'll just bring that slide up again. How about that? We can talk about the 4 different steps. Clancy has got our reasons written down already.
Okay. Introductory statement. I place this class of honey 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so yeah, we got our placings.
I placed the 5 kilogram tub of honey first because it is the least expensive honey to use. The total cost of all the honey required is $35, and the 1 tub is all that is needed. So that's, I kind of didn't make a general statement. It was an obvious, this was an obvious class and pretty straightforward. So then going on to our pairs, let's move to the top pair. I placed 4 over 3 because the raw honey is less expensive than the creamed honey. The raw honey would cost $10 less than the creamed honey to make the 100 dozen cookies. The raw honey also has only one container to recycle, and as compared to 5 containers of the creamed honey. Granted, the creamed honey would have fewer contaminants, but the impurities in the raw honey wouldn't be noticed in the final product and would not change the flavor of the quality of the cookies. Good. Let's go to our middle pair. In my second pair, I placed 3 over 2 because the creamed honey would cost $5 less than the liquid honey. The members would also have half as many containers to recycle with the creamed honey as compared to the liquid. I grant the liquid honey would be the easiest to measure, but just heating the creamed or the raw honey for that matter in warm water will make it equally easy to use. Then let's talk about the bottom pair. In my final pair, I placed 2 over 1 because the liquid honey is more convenient and would cost less to use than the comb honey. I recognize the comb honey wouldn't have any containers to recycle, but the comb honey would need a lot of processing to use in the cookie recipe. And then we move on to talking about the 4th place item. The comb honey is impractical to use since the honey would have to be extracted from the honeycomb and the cost would be more than their $50 budget. Summarizing statement, for these reasons, I place this class of honey 4, 3, 2, 1. Are there any questions on that? All pretty straightforward.
Yeah, we know we ripped through that one pretty quick. It wasn't one that we were really asking you to do with us. It was more just an example because there is some math involved. It took some brain power to sort out. But does that make sense to the way Clancy was able to run through that and we did all the steps start to finish for this one class? Like we went through all of our steps.
Okay, I did mention that I would talk about splits, and I will just take a quick minute and talk about it for a moment now. Splits are the numbers that are used to help figure out the points given for your rankings. Okay, back to the honey. It was pretty easy to decide that the comb honey placed last and the raw honey was best for the members to use. But the difference between the creamed honey and the liquid honey was quite close. Splits are values given to the three pairs of items, top, middle, and bottom. The lower the number, and usually the numbers are between 1 and 10, but the lower the number, the more difficult the decision was for placing. So the split between the raw and the creamed honey was fairly easy. So let's call that split about a 3. The split between the creamed and liquid honey is a lot closer, so we'll give that a 1. You had to think about that one. We'll say that's a 1. The split between the liquid and comb honey was by far the easiest decision. We'll give that a 6. That was a pretty no-brainer. And so the split number for that last pair is 6. So what does all this mean? It means that if you were to place the liquid honey over the creamed honey, it wouldn't matter much. Maybe you felt that the convenience of the liquid honey was worth the price difference. But if you placed the comb honey anywhere other than last, it would be a big mistake. The ranking of 4, 3, 2, 1 is the best. 4, 2, 3, 1 would not be the end of the world. But placing the honey 1, 2, 3, 4 just might be. I actually downloaded a scoring app on my phone, and I put the splits for this into it for the honey class. 4, 3, 2, 1 was worth 50 points, of course.
Because it was perfect.
Yeah, you betcha. You get it right, you get 50 points. By mixing up the middle pair and putting it 4, 2, 3, 1,
so that would
you only lost 1 point.
Liquid over cream.
Put in liquid over the cream. 4, 3, 2, 1. You only lost 1 point. It was still worth 49. But if you went and switched the entire around and put it down as 1, 2, 3, 4, that's only worth 19 points. Makes a huge difference. That is also where you have to make sure that you have the correct placing marked on your card as well. Because if you mark the wrong placing, it can be just catastrophic to your final score. So are there any more questions?
We do have a question, Clancy. Is people are wanting to know what the scoring app was called. Because that, especially if you're an organizer, because remember, we don't use our phones during the competition, so it wouldn't be so much of a help for the competitors. But for people who are volunteering as office staff, who were trying to figure out, okay, well, of the 50 points possible for everybody who did this class, depending on what order they did their rankings, what points do they get out of the 50, depending on how correct or off base they were. What's the name of that app?
That is one. Yeah, that is one thing that the office staff really does need. They need either the Hormel scale, which is an actual slide that they use to do it, or the app on the phone. This app on the phone, the one I put down was LSJ Scoring, and it is actually for livestock judging. There, I said the L word again. But it works perfectly well for any judging that you're going to do. And it's pretty straightforward. It looks an awful lot like that judging card that we showed you earlier, for that matter. It really does. So actually on the judging card, because the score was, the official placing was 4, 3, 2, 1. That's right down the very last in the lower right-hand corner. That would be the one that you marked. So anyway, yes, LJ
or LJS.
LSJ Scoring. It's LSJ Scoring. Yeah.
Okay, so I typed it properly. Good.
Yeah. I guess LSJ probably stands for livestock judging. So there we go. And that's about all I have. We're open to questions.
Yeah, we've covered the basics here. But the one thing that you can do to help you out the most, whether you're new or seasoned at consumer decision making, is just practice. just,
Absolutely.
take the time to walk through the steps and consider it start to finish, and then it'll just become second nature. It's the same as when we talk about public speaking or demonstrations, as we have an introduction and a salutation, and then the guts of your speech, and then your conclusion. Like, we have these steps that we follow to work through every class, same as you would writing a speech or preparing a demonstration. So we know it's a lot of information, and we want to make sure that it makes sense. So we're going to open up the floor for any questions. You can raise your hand, put something in the chat. And if you don't have any questions, and if you're done, if you are just a member and you don't want to stick around for the next part, even though it's valuable to learn about how consumer decision-making competitions can be set up, you feel free to jump off if you don't have any questions. Thank you so much for joining us. And feel free to hang out. We would love to have you for this next part, but we'll take a 2-minute recess once we answer some of your questions, so everyone can get reorganized to talk then with leaders and organizers, okay? So I'm keeping an eye on the chat. We're going to see if we have any questions come through. And remember,
a lot
this
of nice
is
comments.
Aw, thank you guys. Yes.
Gonna have me tearing up here right away.
Aw, Clamp, you big softy.
Yeah, I'm a big softy. That's right. Everybody knows.
And so just a reminder, we will share the slides afterwards, and this is being recorded today, so you can always go back and take another look. And we'll make sure that you have the judging card as well, if that didn't get sent out in the first email that Tracy sent everybody. Post the recipe again. That will be part of the package we can send out afterwards, Tracy. We'll make sure that we have the scenario if that's what you're interested in, if you wanted to do this class, possibly online. Goodbye, everybody.